Hello, my name is Andrea, and this is High Literature, a program where I introduce books and comics and art and stories to you, the viewer. I have been reading a lot of Capote lately, big surprise. Because it's the holidays, and he has these autobiographical stories that take place over Thanksgiving and Christmas, and they are so good. Um, and so I reread them, you know, every year. And after I finish them again, I just kind of wanted to keep going with like the Capote feels, and I was like, I know I have like some collections of like short stories and stuff. So I went through my shelves and went through all my Capote stuff and discovered that there are actually quite a few short stories of his that I haven't read yet. And so I was reading, it's this book here. It's The Grass Harp, including A Tree of Night and Other Stories. This guy right here, and it's kind of hard to see, but there are, let's see here. So The Grass Harp is the main story in this book, and these are all of the other stories here. Quite a few, and let's see here. The Grass Harp was something that I read, and it just knocked me out so much. It's a great story, but it's sad. Like most of Capote's writings, all of Capote's writings, are all of his stories sad? I think so. Interesting. So, set on the outskirts of a small southern town, The Grass Harp tells the story of three endearing misfits, an orphaned boy and two whimsical old ladies, who one day take up residence in a treehouse. As they pass sweet yet hazardous hours in a china tree, the Grass Harp manages to convey all the pleasures and responsibilities of freedom. But most of all, it teaches us about the sacredness of love, that love is a chain of love, as nature is a chain of life. Hi, little baby. Hi. Hi, baby. This volume also includes Capote's A Tree of Night and Other Stories, which the Washington Post called unobtrusively beautiful, a superlative book. Hi, little baby. Oh, God, you're just so cute. I just love you so much. Pumpkin, I gave you treats. I gave you treats, baby. She's gonna go harass Cleo. Leave Cleo alone. She said, I will not. So I... Hey! Leave her alone. Oh my God. Cleo, come here, baby. Come here. I'm just going to dive in. This story is very different from Capote's usual writings. Just, I don't know, it's like going from OK Computer to Kid A. That probably doesn't make any sense, but it's the same creator. But what are you doing? What are you eating? You guys are killing me. Anyway, yeah, I feel like I need to start this over, but if I do, it'll be like the 6th time, and I'm getting frustrated, and I'm gonna not do it at all. I love my cats. So this story is called Master Misery, and I'm just gonna start reading. Very strange story, but I love it. Her high heels clacking across the marble foyer made her think of ice cubes rattling in a glass, and the flowers, those autumn chrysanthemums in the urn at the entrance, if touched, they would shatter, splinter, she was sure, into frozen dust. Yet the house was warm, even somewhat overheated, but cold, and Sylvia shivered, but cold, like the snowy, swollen wastes of the secretary's face. Miss Mozart, who dressed all in white as though she were a nurse. Perhaps she really was. That, of course, could be the answer. Mr. Reavercombe, you are mad, and this is your nurse. She thought about it for a moment. Well, no. And now the butler brought her scarf. His beauty touched her. Slender, so gentle, a black man with freckled skin and reddish, unreflecting eyes. What has gotten it? Why are you guys just determined? You're just determined. Please. What? All right. I'm not going to start this video over because if I do, I'm not going to start it again. I'm just going to let you guys out and you can just run around and do whatever you want outside. How about that? Huh? Come on. Come on. Come on. Yes. There you go. There you go. Bye. Okay. As he opened the door, Miss Mozart appeared, her starched uniform rustling dryly in the hall. We hope you will return, she said, and handed Sylvia a sealed envelope. Mrs. Reavercombe was most particularly pleased. Outside, dusk was falling like blue flakes, and Sylvia walked cross town along the November streets until she reached the lonely upper reaches of Fifth Avenue. It occurred to her then that she might walk home through the park, an act of defiance almost, for Henry and Estelle, always insistent upon their city wisdom, had said over and over again, Sylvia, you have no idea how dangerous it is walking in the park after dark. Look what happened to Myrtle Calisher. This isn't Easton, honey. That was the other thing they said. And said. God, she was sick of it. Still, and aside from a few of the other typists at Snug Fair, an underwear company for which she worked, who else in New York did she know? Oh, it would be all right if only she did not have to live with them, if she could afford somewhere a small room of her own. But there in that chintz, cramped apartment, she sometimes felt she would choke them both. And why did she come to New York? For whatever reason, and it was indeed becoming vague, a principal cause of leaving Easton had been to rid herself of Henry and Estelle, or rather their counterparts, though in point of fact, Estelle was actually from Easton, a town north of Cincinnati. She and Sylvia had grown up together. The real trouble with Henry and Estelle was that they were so excruciatingly married. Namby-pamby, bootsy-totsy, and everything had a name. The telephone was Tinkling Tilly, the sofa Our Nell, the bed Big Bear. Yes, and what about those his-her towels, those his-her pillows? Enough to drive you loony. Loony, she said out loud, the quiet park erasing her voice. It was lovely now, and she was right to have walked here, with wind moving through the leaves and globe lamps freshly aglow, kindling the chalk drawings of children, pink birds, blue arrows, green hearts. But suddenly, like a pair of obscene words, there appeared on the path 2 boys,
Pimple-faced, grinning, they loomed in the dusk like menacing flames, and Sylvia, passing them, felt a burning all through her, quite as though she'd brushed fire. They turned and followed her past a deserted playground, one of them bumping a stick along an iron fence, the other whistling. These sounds accumulated around her like the gathering roar of an oncoming engine, and when one of the boys with a laugh called, "Hey, what's a hurry?" her mouth twisted for breath. Don't, she thought, thinking to throw down her purse and run. At that moment, a man walking a dog came up a side path, and she followed at his heels to the exit. Wouldn't they feel gratified, Henry and Estelle? Wouldn't they "we told you so" if she were to tell them? And what is more, Estelle would write it home, and the next thing you knew, it would be all over Easton that she'd been raped in Central Park. She spent the rest of the way home despising New York. And I have such trouble with this word, anonymity, its virtuous terror. And the squeaking drain pipe all night. Ceaseless footfall, subway corridor, numbered door, 3C. "Shh, honey," Estelle said, sidling out of the kitchen. "Bootsy's doing his homework." Sure enough, Henry, a law student at Columbia, was hunched over his books in the living room, and Sylvia, at Estelle's request, took off her shoes before tiptoeing through. Once inside her room, she threw herself on the bed and put her hands over her eyes. Had today really happened? Miss Mozart and Mr. Reavercombe? Were they really there in the tall house on 78th Street? "So, honey, what happened today?" Estelle had entered without knocking. Sylvia sat up on her elbow. "Nothing, except that I typed 97 letters. "About what, honey?" asked Estelle, using Sylvia's hairbrush. "Oh, hell, what do you suppose? Snug fare, the shorts that safely support our leaders of science and industry." "Gee, honey, don't sound so cross. I don't know what's wrong with you sometimes. You sound so cross. Ouch! Why don't you get a new hairbrush? This one's just knotted with hair. Mostly yours. What did you say?" "Skip it." "Oh, I thought you said something." "Anyway, like I was saying, I wish you didn't have to go to that office and come home every day feeling cross and out of sorts. Personally, and I said this to Bootsy just last night, and he agreed with me 100%, I said, 'Bootsy, I think Sylvia ought to get married. A girl high-strung like that needs her tensions relaxed. There's no earthly reason why you shouldn't. I mean, maybe you're not pretty in the ordinary sense, but you have beautiful eyes and an intelligent, really sincere look. In fact, you're the sort of girl any professional man would be lucky to get. And I should think you would want to. Look what a difference I am since I married Henry. Doesn't it make you lonesome seeing how happy we are? I'm here to tell you, honey, there is nothing like lying in bed at night with a man's arms around you and—" "Estelle, for Christ's sake!" Sylvia sat bolt upright in bed, anger on her cheeks like rouge. But after a moment she bit her lip and lowered her eyelids. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to shout. Only I wish you wouldn't talk like that." "It's all right," said Estelle, smiling in a dumb, puzzled way. Then she went over and gave Sylvia a kiss. "I understand, honey. It's just that you're plain worn out, and I'll bet you haven't had anything to eat either. Come on in the kitchen and I'll scramble you some eggs." When Estelle set the eggs before her, Sylvia felt quite ashamed. After all, Estelle was trying to be nice. And so then, as though to make it all up, she said, "Something did happen today." Estelle sat down across from her with a cup of coffee, and Sylvia went on. "I don't know how to tell about it. It's so odd. But, well, I had lunch at the Automat today, and I had to share the table with these 3 men. I might as well have been invisible because they talked about the most personal things. One of the men said his girlfriend was going to have a baby, and he didn't know where he was going to get the money to do anything about it. So one of the other men asked him, why didn't he sell something? Hello. Hi, baby. He said he didn't have anything to sell. Whereupon the third man, he was rather delicate and didn't look as if he belonged with the others, said, yes, there was something you could sell. Dreams. Even I laughed, but the man shook his head and said very seriously, no, it was perfectly true. His wife's aunt, Miss Mozart, worked for a rich man who bought dreams, regular nighttime dreams, from anybody. And he wrote down the man's name and address and gave it to his friend. But the man simply left it lying on the table. It was too crazy for him, he said. Me too, Estelle put in a little righteously. I don't know, said Sylvia, lighting a cigarette. But I couldn't get it out of my head. The name written on the paper was A.F. Reavercombe, and the address was on East 78th Street. I only glanced at it for a moment, but it was... I don't know. I couldn't seem to forget it. It was beginning to give me a headache. So I left the office early. Slowly and with emphasis, Estelle put her coffee cup down. Honey, listen. You don't mean you went to see him, this Reavercombe nut? I didn't mean to, she said, immediately embarrassed. To try and tell about it, she now realized was a mistake. Estelle had no imagination, and she would never understand. So her eyes narrowed the way they always did when she composed a lie. And as a matter of fact, I didn't, she said flatly. I started to, but then I realized how silly it was and went for a walk instead. That was sensible of you, said Estelle as she began stacking dishes in the kitchen sink. Imagine what might have happened. Buying dreams. Whoever heard? Honey, this sure isn't Easton. Before retiring, Sylvia took a seconal, something she seldom did, but she knew otherwise she would never rest, not with her mind so nimble and somersaulting. Then, too, she felt a curious sadness, a sense of loss, as though she'd been the victim of some real or even moral theft, as though, in fact, the boys encountered in the park had snatched, abruptly she switched on the light, her purse, the envelope Miss Mozart had handed her. It was in the purse, and until now she had forgotten it. She tore it open. Inside there was a blue note folded around a bill, and on the note there was written, in payment of one dream, $5. And now she believed it. It was true, and she had sold Mr. Reavercombe a dream. Could it really be so simple as that? She laughed a little as she turned off the light again. If she were to sell a dream only twice a week, think of what she could do. A place somewhere all her own, she thought, deepening toward sleep. Ease, like firelight, wavered over her, and there came the moment of twilight lantern slides deeply deeper. His lips, his arms, telescoped, descending, and distastefully she kicked away the blanket. Were these cold man-arms the arms Estelle had spoken of? Mr. Reavercombe's lips brushed her ear as he leaned far into her sleep. Tell me, he whispered. It was a week before she saw him again, a Sunday afternoon in early December. She'd left the apartment intending to see a movie, but somehow, and as though it had happened without her knowledge, she found herself on Madison Avenue, 2 blocks from Mr. Reavercombe's. It was a cold, silver-skied day, with winds sharp and catching as hollyhock. In store windows, icicles of Christmas tinsel twinkled amid mounds of sequined snow, all to Sylvia's distress, for she hated holidays, those times when one is most alone. In one window she saw a spectacle which made her stop still. It was a life-size mechanical Santa Claus. Slapping his stomach, he rocked back and forth in a frenzy of electrical mirth. You could hear beyond the thick glass his squeaky, uproarious laughter. The longer she watched, the more evil he seemed, until finally with a shudder she turned and made her way into the street of Mr. Reavercombe's house. It was, from the outside, an ordinary townhouse, perhaps a trifle less polished, less imposing than some others, but relatively grand all the same. Winter-withered ivy writhed about the leaded window panes and trailed in octopus ropes over the door. At the sides of the door were 2 small stone lions with blind, chipped eyes. Sylvia took a breath and rang the bell. Mr. Reavercombe's butler recognized her with a courteous smile. On the previous visit, the parlor in which she had awaited her audience with Mr. Reavercombe had been empty except for herself. This time there were others present, women of several appearances, and an excessively nervous, gnat-eyed young man. Had this group been what it resembled, namely patients in a doctor's anteroom, he would have seemed either an expectant father or a victim of St. Vitus? St. Vitus? I'm going to have to look that up. Sylvia was seated next to him, and his fidgety eyes unbuttoned her rapidly. Whatever he saw apparently intrigued him very little, and Sylvia was grateful when he went back to his twitchy preoccupations. Gradually, though, she became conscious of how interested in her the assemblage seemed. In the dim, doubtful light of the plant-filled room, their gazes were more rigid than the chairs upon which they sat. One woman was particularly restless. Ordinarily, her face would have had a soft, commonplace sweetness, but now, watching Sylvia, it was ugly with distrust, jealousy. As though trying to tame some creature which might suddenly spring full-fanged, she sat stroking a flea-bitten neck fur, her stare continuing its assault until the earthquake footstep of Miss Mozart was heard in the hall. Immediately, and like frightened students, the group, separating into their individual entities, came to attention. "You, Mr. Pocker," accused Miss Mozart. "You're next." And Mr. Pocker, wringing his hands, jittering his eyes, followed after her. In the dusk room, the gathering settled again, like sun-motes. "Hi, Mama, hi." It began then to rain. Melting window reflections quivered on the walls, and Mr. Reavercomb's young butler, seeping through the room, stirred a fire in the grate, set tea things upon a table. Sylvia, nearest the fire, felt drowsy with warmth and the noise of rain. Her head tilted sideways, she closed her eyes, neither asleep nor fully awake. For a long while, only the crystal swingings of a clock scratched the polished silence of Mr. Reavercomb's house. And then, abruptly, there was an enormous commotion in the hall, capsizing the room into a fury of sound. A bull-deep voice, vulgar as red, roared out, "Stop, O'Reilly! The ballet butler and who else?" The owner of this voice, a tub-shaped, brick-colored little man, shoved his way to the parlor threshold where he stood drunkenly seesawing from foot to foot. "Well, well, well," he said, his gin-hoarse voice descending the scale. "And all these ladies before me? But O'Reilly is a gentleman. O'Reilly waits his turn." "Not here, he doesn't," said Miss Mozart, stealing up behind him and seizing him sternly by the collar. His face went even redder and his eyes bubbled out. "You're choking me," he gasped, but Miss Mozart, whose green, pale hands were as strong as oak roots, jerked his tie still tighter and propelled him toward the door, which presently slammed with shattering effect. A teacup tinkled, the dry dahlia leaves tumbled from their heights. The lady with the fur slipped an aspirin into her mouth. "Disgusting," she said, and the others, all except Sylvia, laughed delicately, admiringly, as Miss Mozart strode past, dusting her hands. It was raining thick and darkly when Sylvia left Mr. Reavercomb's. She looked around the desolate street for a taxi. There was nothing, however, and no one. Yes, someone, the drunk man who had caused the disturbance. Like a lonely city child, he was leaning against a parked car and bouncing a rubber ball up and down. "Look it, kid," he said to Sylvia. "Look it. I just found this ball. Do you suppose that means good luck?" Sylvia smiled at him. For all his bravado, she thought him rather harmless, and there was a quality in his face, some grinning sadness suggesting a clown minus makeup. Juggling his ball, he skipped along after her as she headed toward Madison Avenue. "I'll bet I made a fool of myself in there," he said. "When I do things like that, I just want to sit down and cry." Standing so long in the rain seemed to have sobered him considerably. "But she ought not to have choked me that way. Damn, she's too rough. I've known some rough women. My sister Berenice could brand the wildest bull, but that other one, she's the roughest of the lot. Mark O'Reilly's worried she's going to end up in the electric chair." "Thank you, little baby." "She's going to end up in the electric chair," he said, and smacked his lips. "They've got no cause to treat me like that. It's every bit his fault anyhow. I didn't have an awful lot to begin with, but then he took it, every word, and now I've got niente, kid, niente." "That's too bad," said Sylvia, though she did not know what she was being sympathetic about. "Are you a clown, Mr. O'Reilly?" "Was," he said. By this time they had reached the avenue, but Sylvia did not even look for a taxi. She wanted to walk on in the rain with the man who had been a clown. When I was a little girl, I only liked clown dolls, she told him. My room at home was like a circus. I've been other things besides a clown. I've sold insurance, too. Oh, said Sylvia, disappointed. And what do you do now? O'Reilly chuckled and threw his ball especially high. After the catch, his head remained tilted upward. I watch the sky, he said. There I am with my suitcase, traveling through the blue. It's where you travel when you've got no place else to go. But what do I do on this planet? I have stolen, begged, and sold my dreams, all for purposes of whiskey. Hi, baby. Hi. Hi, sweetie. A man cannot travel in the blue without a bottle, which brings us to a point. How'd you take it, baby, if I asked for the loan of $1? I'd take it fine, Sylvia replied, and paused, uncertain of what she'd say next. They'd wandered along so slowly, the stiff rain enclosing them like an insulating pressure. It was as though she were walking with a childhood doll, one grown miraculous and capable. She reached and held his hand. Dear clown traveling in the blue. But I haven't got $1. All I've got is 70 cents. No hard feelings, said O'Reilly. But honest, is that the kind of money he's paying nowadays? Sylvia knew whom he meant. No. As a matter of fact, I didn't sell him a dream. She made no attempt to explain. She didn't understand it herself. Confronting the graying invisibility of Mr. Reavercombe, impeccable, exact as a scale, surrounded in a cologne of clinical odors, flat gray eyes planted like seed, and the anonymity of his face. I hate that word. And sealed within steel, dull lenses. She could not remember a dream. And so she told of 2 thieves who had chased her through the park and in and out among the swings of a playground. Stop, he said for me to stop. There are dreams and dreams, he said, but that is not a real one. That is one you are making up. Now, how do you suppose he knew that? So I told him another dream. It was about him, of how he held me in the night with balloons rising and moons falling all around. He said he was not interested in dreams concerning himself. Miss Mozart, who transcribed the dreams in shorthand, was told to call the next person. I don't think I will go back there again, she said. You will, said O'Reilly. Look at me. Even I go back. And he has long since finished with me, Master Misery. Master Misery? Why do you call him that? They reached the corner where the maniacal Santa Claus rocked and bellowed. His laughter echoed in the rainy, squeaking street, and a shadow of him swayed in the rainbow lights of the pavement. O'Reilly, turning his back upon the Santa Claus, smiled and said, I call him Master Misery on account of that's who he is. Master Misery. Only maybe you call him something else. Anyway, he is the same fellow, and you must have known him. All mothers tell their kids about him. He lives in hollows of trees, he comes down chimneys late at night, he lurks in graveyards, and you can hear his step in the attic. The son of a bitch. He's a thief and a threat. He will take everything you have and end by leaving you nothing, not even a dream. Boo, he shouted, and laughed louder than Santa Claus. Now do you know who he is? Sylvia nodded. I know who he is. My family called him something else. But I can't remember what. It was long ago. But you remember him. Yeah, I remember him. Then call him Master Misery, he said, and bouncing his ball, walked away from her. Master Misery, his voice trailed to a mere moth of sound. Master Misery. It was hard to look at Estelle, for she was in front of a window, and the window was filled with windy sun, which hurt Sylvia's eyes, and the glass rattled, which hurt her head. Also, Estelle was lecturing. Her nasal voice sounded as though her throat were a depository of rusty razor blades. I wish you could see yourself, she was saying. Or was that something she said a long while back? Never mind. I don't know what's happened to you. I'll bet you don't weigh 100 pounds. I can see every bone and vein in your hair. You look like a poodle. Sylvia passed a hand over her forehead. What time is it, Estelle? It's 4, she said, interrupting herself long enough to look at her watch. But where is your watch? I sold it, said Sylvia, too tired to lie. It did not matter. She had sold so many things, including her beaver coat and gold mesh evening bag. Estelle shook her head. I give up, honey. I plain give up. And that was the watch your mother gave you for graduation. It's a shame, she said, and made an old maid noise with her mouth. A pity and a shame. I'll never understand why you left us. That is your business, I'm sure. Only how could you have left us for this dump, supplied Sylvia, using the word advisedly. It was a furnished room in the East 60s, between 2nd and 3rd Avenues, large enough for a day bed and a splintery old bureau with a mirror like a cataract eye. It had one window which looked out on a vast vacant lot. You could hear the tough afternoon voices of desperate running boys, and in the distance, like an exclamation point for the skyline, there was the black smokestack of a factory. The smokestack occurred frequently in her dreams. It never failed to arouse Miss Mozart. Phallic, phallic, she would mutter, glancing up from her shorthand. The floor of the room was a garbage pile of books begun but never finished, antique newspapers, even orange hulls, fruit cores, underwear, a spilled powder box. Estelle kicked her way through this trash and sat down on the daybed. Honey, you don't know, but I've been worried crazy. I mean, I've got pride and all that, and if you don't like me, well, okay, but you've got no right to stay away like this and not let me hear from you in over a month. So today I said to Bootsy, Bootsy, I've got a feeling something terrible has happened to Sylvia. You can imagine how I felt when I called your office and they told me you hadn't worked there for the last 4 weeks. What happened? Were you fired? Yes, I was fired. Sylvia began to sit up. Please, Estelle. I've got to get ready. I've got an appointment. Be still. You're not going anywhere till I know what's wrong. The landlady downstairs told me you were found sleepwalking. What do you mean, talking to her? Why are you spying on me? Estelle's eyes puckered as though she were going to cry. She put her hand over Sylvia's and petted it gently. Tell me, honey, is it because of a man? It's because of a man, yes, said Sylvia, laughter at the edge of her voice. You should have come to me before, Estelle sighed. I know about men. There's nothing for you to be ashamed of. A man can have a way with a woman that kind of makes her forget everything else. If Henry wasn't the fine, upstanding potential lawyer that he is, why, I would still love him and do things for him that, before I knew what it was like to be with a man, would have seemed shocking and horrible. But, honey, this fellow you're mixed up with, he's taking advantage of you. It's not that kind of relationship, said Sylvia, getting up and locating a pair of stockings in the furor of her bureau drawers. It hasn't got anything to do with love. Forget about it. In fact, go home and forget about me altogether. Estelle looked at her narrowly. You scare me, Sylvia. You really scare me. Sylvia laughed and went on getting dressed. Do you remember a long time ago when I said you ought to get married? Uh-huh. And now you listen. Sylvia turned around. There was a row of hairpins spaced across her mouth. She extracted them one at a time, all the while she talked. You talk about getting married as though it were the answer absolute. Very well, up to a point, I agree. Sure, I want to be loved. Who the hell doesn't? But even if I was willing to compromise, where is the man I'm going to marry? Believe me, he must have fallen down a manhole. I mean it seriously when I say there are no men in New York. Even if there were, how do you meet them? Every man I ever met here who seemed the slightest bit attractive was either married, too poor to get married, or queer. And anyway, this is no place to fall in love. This is where you ought to come when you want to get over being in love. Sure, I suppose I could marry somebody, but I do not want that, do I? Estelle shrugged. Then what do you want? More than is coming to me. She poked the last hairpin into place and smoothed her eyebrows before the mirror. I have an appointment, Estelle, and it is time for you to go now. I can't leave you like this, said Estelle, her hand waving helplessly around the room. Sylvia, you are my childhood friend. That is just the point. We're not children anymore. At least I'm not. No, I want you to go home, and I don't want you to come here again. I just want you to forget about me. Estelle fluttered at her eyes with a handkerchief, and by the time she reached the door, she was weeping quite loudly. Sylvia could not afford remorse. Having been mean, there was nothing to be but meaner. Go on, she said, following Estelle into the hall, and write home any damn business about me you want to. Letting out a wail that brought other roomers to their doors, Estelle fled down the stairs. After this, Sylvia went back into her room and sucked a piece of sugar to take the sour taste out of her mouth. It was her grandmother's remedy for bad tempers. Then she got down on her knees and pulled from under the bed a cigar box she kept hidden there. When you opened the box, it played a homemade and somewhat disorganized version of "Oh, How I Hate to Get Up in the Morning." Her brother had made the music box and given it to her on her 14th birthday. Eating the sugar, she thought of her grandmother, and hearing the tune, she thought of her brother. The rooms of the house where they had lived rotated before her, all dark, and she like a light moving among them. Up the stairs, down, out and through, spring sweet and lilac shadows in the air, and the creaking of a porch swing. All gone, she thought, calling their names, and now I am absolutely alone. The music stopped, but it went on in her head. She could hear it bugling above the child cries of the vacant lot, and it interfered with her reading. She was reading a little diary-like book she kept inside the box. In this book, she wrote down the essentials of her dreams. They were endless now, and it was so hard to remember. Today she would tell Mr. Reavercombe about the 3 blind children. He would like that. The prices he paid varied, and she was sure this was at least a $10 dream. The cigar box anthem followed her down the stairs and through the streets, and she longed for it to go away. In the store where Santa Claus had been, there was a new and equally unnerving exhibit. Even when she was late to Mr. Reavercombe's, as now, Sylvia was compelled to pause by the window. A plaster girl with intense glass eyes sat astride a bicycle, pedaling at the maddest pace. Though its wheel spokes spun hypnotically, the bicycle, of course, never budged. All that effort and the poor girl going nowhere. It was a pitifully human situation, and one that Sylvia could so exactly identify with herself that she always felt a real pang. The music box rewound in her head. The tune, her brother, the house, a high school dance, the house, the tune. Couldn't Mr. Reavercombe hear it? His penetrating gaze carried such dull suspicion. But he seemed pleased with her dream, and when she left, Miss Mozart gave her an envelope containing $10. I had a $10 dream, she told O'Reilly, and O'Reilly, rubbing his hands together, said, Fine, fine, but that's just my luck, baby. You should have got here sooner, 'cause I went and did a terrible thing. I walked into a liquor store up the street, snatched a quart, and ran. Sylvia didn't believe him until he produced from his pinned-together overcoat a bottle of bourbon already half gone. You're going to get in trouble someday, she said, and then what would happen to me? I don't know what I would do without you. O'Reilly laughed and poured a shot of whiskey into a water glass. They were sitting in an all-night cafeteria, a great glaring food depot alive with blue mirrors and raw murals. Although to Sylvia it seemed a sordid place, they met there frequently for dinner. But even if she could have afforded it, she did not know where else they could go, for together they presented a curious aspect, a young girl and a doddering drunken man. Even here people often stared at them. If they stared long enough, O'Reilly would stiffen with dignity and say, Hello, hot lips, I remember you from way back. Still working in the men's room? But usually they were left to themselves, and sometimes they would sit talking until 2, 3 in the morning. It's a good thing the rest of Master Misery's crowd don't know he gave you that $10. One of them would say you stole the dream. I had that happen once. Eaten up, all of them. Never saw such a bunch of sharks. Worse than actors or clowns or businessmen. Crazy if you think about it. You worry whether you're going to go to sleep, if you're going to have a dream, if you're going to remember the dream. Round and round. So you get a couple of bucks, so you rush to the nearest liquor store or the nearest sleeping pill machine, And first thing you know, you're roaming your way up Outhouse Alley. Why, baby, you know what it's like? It's just like life. No, O'Reilly, that's not what it isn't like. It hasn't anything to do with life. It has more to do with being dead. I feel as though everything were taken from me, as though some thief were stealing me down to the bone. O'Reilly, I tell you, I haven't had an ambition, and there used to be so much. I don't understand it, and I don't know what to do. He grinned. And you say it isn't like life? Who understands life? And who knows what to do? Be serious, she said. Be serious and put away that whiskey and eat your soup before it gets stone cold. She lighted a cigarette, and the smoke, smarting her eyes, intensified her frown. If only I knew what he wanted with those dreams, all typed and filed. What does he do with them? You're right when you say he is Master Misery. He can't be simply some silly quack. It can't be so meaningless as that. But why does he want dreams? Help me, O'Reilly. Think. What does it mean? Squinting one eye, O'Reilly poured himself another drink. The clown-like twist of his mouth hardened into a line of scholarly straightness. That is a $1 million question, kid. Why don't you ask something easy like how to cure the common cold? Yes, kid, what does it mean? I have thought about it a good deal. I have thought about it in the process of making love to a woman, and I have thought about it in the middle of a poker game. He tossed the drink down his throat and shuddered. Now, a sound can start a dream. The noise of one car passing the night can drop 100 sleepers into the deep parts of themselves. It's funny to think of that one car racing through the dark, trailing so many dreams. Sex, a sudden change of light, a pickle. These are little keys that can open up our insides too. But most dreams begin because there are furies inside of us that blow open all the doors. I don't believe in Jesus Christ, but I do believe in people's souls. And I figure it this way, baby. Dreams are the mind of the soul and the secret truth about us. Now, Master Misery, maybe he hasn't got a soul. So bit by bit he borrows yours, steals it like he would steal your dolls or the chicken wing off your plate. Hundreds of souls have passed through him and gone into a filing case. O'Reilly, be serious, she said again, annoyed because she thought he was making more jokes. And look, your soup is... She stopped abruptly, startled by O'Reilly's peculiar expression. He was looking toward the entrance. 3 men were there, 2 policemen and a civilian wearing a clerk's cloth jacket. The clerk was pointing toward their table. O'Reilly's eyes circled the room with trapped despair. He sighed then and leaned back in his seat, ostentatiously pouring himself another drink. "Good evening, gentlemen," he said when the official party confronted him. "Will you join us for a drink?" "You can't arrest him," cried Sylvia. "You can't arrest a clown." She threw her $10 bill at them, but the policemen didn't pay any attention, and she began to pound the table. All the customers in the place were staring, and the manager came running up, wringing his hands. The police said for O'Reilly to get to his feet. "Certainly," O'Reilly said, "though I do think it's shocking you have to trouble yourselves with such petty crimes as mine, when everywhere there are master thieves afoot. For instance, this pretty child," he stepped between the officers and pointed to Sylvia. "She is the recent victim of a major theft. Poor baby, she has had her soul stolen." For 2 days following O'Reilly's arrest, Sylvia did not leave her room. Sun on the window, then dark. By the 3rd day, she had run out of cigarettes, so she ventured as far as the corner delicatessen. She bought a package of cupcakes, a can of sardines, a newspaper, and cigarettes. In all this time, she'd not eaten, and it was a light, delicious, sharpening sensation. But the climb back up the stairs, the relief of closing the door, these so exhausted her, she could not quite make the daybed. She slid down to the floor and did not move until it was day again. She thought afterwards that she'd been there about 20 minutes. Turning on the radio as loud as it would go, she dragged a chair up to the window and opened the newspaper on her lap. "Lana denies, Russia rejects, miners conciliate." Of all things, this was saddest, that life goes on. If one leaves one's lover, life should stop for him. And if one disappears from the world, then the world should stop too. And it never did. And that was the real reason for most people getting up in the morning. Not because it would matter, but because it wouldn't. But if Mr. Reavercombe succeeded, finally, in collecting all the dreams out of every head, perhaps. The idea slipped, becoming entangled with radio and newspaper. Falling temperatures, a snowstorm moving across Colorado, across the West, falling upon all the small towns, yellowing every light, filling every footfall, falling now and here. But how quickly it had come, the snowstorm, the roofs, the vacant lot, the distance deep and white and deepening, like sheep. She looked at the paper and she looked at the snow. But it must have been snowing all day. It could not have just started. There was no sound of traffic. In the swirling waste of the vacant lot, children circled a bonfire. A car, buried at the curb, winked its headlights. Help, help, silent like the heart's distress. She crumbled a cupcake and sprinkled it on the windowsill. Northbirds would come to keep her company, and she left the window open for them. Snow wind scattered flakes that dissolved on the floor like April Fool jewels. Present life can be beautiful. Turn down that radio! The Witch of the Woods was tapping at her door. Yes, Miss Halloran, she said, and turned off the radio altogether. Snow quiet, sleep silent, only the fun fire far away singing of children. And the room was blue with cold, colder than the cold of fairy tales. This is going to be one wonky video, but I am not stopping and starting over now. I have stopped and started this video over, I've lost count. These cats just I'm committed. I don't care. I'm not stopping. I'm not starting over. Where are we at? This is almost an hour. Yep, I am not starting over. You can be as loud as you want. But her moment of waking was warm and held. The window was closed, and a man's arms were around her. He was singing to her, his voice gentle but jaunty. Cherry berry, money berry, happy berry pie, but the best old pie is a loveberry pie. Oh, Riley, is it really you? He squeezed her. Baby's awake now. And how does she feel? I thought I was dead, she said, and happiness winged around inside her like a bird lamed but still flying. She tried to hug him, but she was too weak. I love you, O'Reilly. You're my only friend. And I was so frightened. I thought I would never see you again. She paused, remembering. But why aren't you in jail? O'Reilly's face got all tickled and pink. I was never in jail, he said mysteriously. But first, let's have something to eat. I brought some things up from the delicatessen this morning. She had a sudden feeling of floating. How long have you been here? Since yesterday, he said, fussing around with bundles and paper plates. You let me in yourself. That's impossible. I don't remember it at all. I know, he said, leaving it at that. Here, drink your milk like a good kid, and I'll tell you a real wicked story. Oh, it's wild, he promised, slapping his sides gladly and looking more than ever like a clown. Well, like I said, I never was in jail, and this bit of fortune came to me because I was being hustled down the street by these bindle stiffs. Bindle stiffs? That's different. I was being hustled down the street by those bindle stiffs when who should I see come swinging along but the gorilla woman? You guessed it, Miss Mozart. Hi, I says to her, off to the barber shop for a shave? It's about time you were put under arrest, she says, and smiles at one of the cops. Do your duty, officer. Ho, I says to her, I'm not under arrest. Me, I'm just on my way to the station house to give them the lowdown on you, you dirty communist. You can imagine what sort of holler she set up then. She grabbed hold of me, and the cops grabbed hold of her. Can't say I didn't warn them. Careful, boys, I said. She's got hair on her chest, and she sure did lay about her. So I just sort of walked off down the street. Never have believed in standing around watching fistfights the way people do in this city. O'Reilly stayed with her in the room over the weekend. It was like the most beautiful party Sylvia could remember. She'd never laughed so much, for one thing, and no one, certainly no one in her family, had ever made her feel so loved. O'Reilly was a fine cook, and he fixed delicious dishes on the little electric stove. Once he scooped snow off the windowsill and made sherbet flavored with strawberry syrup. By Sunday she was strong enough to dance. They turned on the radio, and she danced until she fell to her knees, windless and laughing. I'll never be afraid again, she said. I hardly know what I was afraid of to begin with. The same things you'll be afraid of next time, O'Reilly told her quietly. That is a quality of Master Misery. No one ever knows what he is, not even children, and they know mostly everything. Sylvia went to the window. An arctic whiteness lay over the city, but the snow had stopped, and the night sky was as clear as ice. There, riding above the river, she saw the first star of evening. I see the first star, she said, crossing her fingers. And what do you wish when you see the first star? I wish to see another star, she said. At least that is what I usually wish. But tonight, she sat down on the floor and leaned her head against his knee. Tonight I wished that I could have back my dreams. Don't we all, O'Reilly said, stroking her hair. But then what would you do? I mean, what would you do if you could have them back? Sylvia was silent a moment. When she spoke, her eyes were gravely distant. I would go home, she said slowly, and that is a terrible decision, for it would mean giving up most of my other dreams. But if Mr. Reavercombe would let me have them back, then I would go home tomorrow. Saying nothing, O'Reilly went to the closet and brought back her coat. But why? She asked as he helped her on with it. Never mind, he said. Just do what I tell you. We're going to pay Mr. Reavercombe a call, and you're going to ask him to give you back your dreams. It's a chance. Sylvia balked at the door. Please, O'Reilly, don't make me go. I can't. Please, I'm afraid. I thought you said you'd never be afraid again. But once in the street, he hurried her so quickly against the wind, she did not have time to be frightened. It was Sunday. Stores were closed, and the traffic lights seemed to wink only for them, for there were no moving cars along the snow-deep avenue. Sylvia even forgot where they were going and chattered of trivial oddments. Right here on this corner is where she'd seen Garbo, and over there, that is where the old woman was run over. Presently, however, she stopped, out of breath and overwhelmed with sudden realization. I can't, O'Reilly, she said, pulling back. What can I say to him? Make it like a business deal, said O'Reilly. Tell him straight out that you want your dreams, and if he'll give them to you, you'll pay back all the money. On the installment plan, naturally. It's simple enough, kid. Why the hell couldn't he give them back? They are all right there in a filing case. This speech was somehow convincing, and stamping her frozen feet, Sylvia went ahead with a certain courage. That's the kid, he said. They separated on 3rd Avenue, O'Reilly being of the opinion that Mr. Reavercombe's immediate neighborhood was not for the moment precisely safe, because, he's basically running from the cops now. You can find himself in a doorway, now and then lighting a match and singing aloud. But the best old pie is a whiskey berry pie. Like a wolf, a long, thin dog came padding over the moon slats under the elevated, and across the street there were the misty shapes of men ganged around a bar. The idea of maybe caging a drink in there made him groggy. Just as he had decided on perhaps trying something of the sort, Sylvia appeared, and she was in his arms before he knew that it was really her. "It can't be so bad, sweetheart," he said softly, holding her as best he could. "Don't cry, baby. It's too cold to cry. You'll chap your face." As she strangled for words, her crying evolved into a tremulous, unnatural laugh. The air was filled with the smoke of her laughter. "Do you know what he said?" she gasped. "Do you know what he said when I asked for my dreams?" Her head fell back, and her laughter rose and carried over the street like an abandoned, wildly colored kite. O'Reilly had finally to shake her by the shoulders. "He said I couldn't have them back because he used them all up." She was silent then, her face smoothing into an expressionless calm. She put her arm through O'Reilly's, and together they moved down the street. But it was as if they were friends pacing a platform, each waiting for the other's train. And when they reached the corner, he cleared his throat and said, "I guess I'd better turn off here. It's as likely a spot as any." Sylvia held on to his sleeve. "But where will you go, O'Reilly?" "Traveling in the blue," he said, trying a smile that didn't work out very well. She opened her purse. "A man cannot travel in the blue without a bottle," she said, and kissing him on the cheek, slipped $5 in his pocket. "Bless you, baby." It did not matter that it was the last of her money, that now she would have to walk home, and alone. The pilings of snow were like the white waves of a white sea, and she rode upon them, carried by winds and tides of the moon. "I do not know what I want, and perhaps I shall never know, but my only wish from every star will always be another star, and truly I am not afraid," she thought. 2 boys came out of a bar and stared at her. In some park, some long time ago, she'd seen 2 boys, and they might be the same. "Truly I am not afraid," she thought, hearing their snowy footsteps following her. And anyway, there was nothing left to steal. God! What a strange story. I was reading some reviews off Goodreads, and they're just great. This one says, "A story one should read slowly," and then in parentheses, "and possibly more than once, to savor each sentence." Agreed. There is something so enchanting and captivating about Truman Capote's writing. Even this bite-sized example was a journey and a pleasure, even the strange, uncertain bits. Each sentence is like golden honey and pungent philosophy stirred together. I really liked this one. It's so simple, but it's so honest. This short story is about a young woman who is living in New York with a married friend/relative. Her life is aimless, and she hears about a man who pays money for dreams. She begins selling her dreams, meets an ex-clown, and her life falls apart. This story has lots of symbolism, but I must confess, most of it was lost on me. The story was very well written. I love how this person just states outright how most of the story was lost on them, but that it was still well written. I just think that's so cool. How I just love that appreciation, how you can still find virtue in something despite not understanding it. And I just think that's really neat. And somebody else said, my thought is that this was written in ode to Hopper's painting Soie Bleue. And so I Googled Hopper's Soie Bleue painting, and the artist is Edward Hopper, and the painting depicts a sad clown in an outdoor cafe representing the universal human experience of feeling misunderstood and invisible. Hi, little baby. Hi. Ooh, you chilly. Ooh, you chilly. You enjoying that chilly winter air? Yeah. Hi, little mama. Hi. Hi. Oh, you're such a sweetie. You're a good baby. Hi. Well, I guess I better let you go. It is time for wet food, I think. I'm sorry that this was such a herky-jerky reading, but don't chew on my plant. Don't do that. Hi, baby. Oh, you're such a good girl. Okay, I better go. All right, well, thanks for hanging out, and I hope that you can read this story for yourself. It is available online. I found like a PDF, and I was reading it at work. Hi, because this story, like this read aloud that I just did, this is the third time I've read it. There's just something really special about it, and I think everybody should read it. Isn't that right, little baby? Everybody should read it. It's really good. Just to see, how does it make you feel? What does it make you think? Does it remind you of anything? Oh, little baby. Come here, little mama. Yes, it's wet food time. It's wet food time. All right, bye.